So you see, it's not just an investment, Mom. It's QA investment. The one that sets us up. For good. The voice is my son's. Leo. It's his salesman voice. A smooth, urgent river of words, designed to sweep away doubt, to make you feel that if you don't jump in right now, you'll be left behind on the shore, a fool in the dust. I've known that voice for 30 years. It sold me on a set of encyclopedias we couldn't afford when he was 10. It sold me on co-signing for a sports car he couldn't afford when he was 22. It has sold me on a lifetime of his grand plans and last chances. I look at my hand resting on the faded roses. My husband, Robert, bought me this chair. He said the flowers matched my cheeks when I laughed. Robert has been gone for 10 years. The chair is still here. The laughter is not. It's a sure thing, Leo continues, his voice crackling with the static of his own enthusiasm. I've run the numbers. I've talked to the right people. All I need is the capital to get in on the ground floor. Another 50, that's it. That's all that's standing between me and everything. 50. He says it so casually. $50,000. It's a number that is, to him, a simple obstacle. A locked door to which I hold the key. He does not see it as the sum total of my life's prudence. It is Robert's life insurance payout, nursed and protected for a decade. It is the buffer between me and the cold, hard edge of the world. It is my safety, my peace of mind. To him, it is just another 50. I don't say anything. I just listen to the sound of his breathing on the other end of the line, the expectant pause. He wants me to ask questions. He wants me to say, "Tell me more, son." He wants me to be drawn into the web of his excitement, so that my refusal will feel like a personal betrayal of his dream. I know what this dream is. It has a different name every year, but the shape of it is always the same. A new tech startup. A revolutionary app. A can't-miss real estate flip. Each one is a rocket ship to the moon, and each one has exploded on the launch pad, leaving behind only the smoke of his debts and the shrapnel of his broken promises. And I was always there. The ground crew. The one who quietly cleaned up the wreckage. The silence stretches. I can feel him getting impatient. The smooth salesman is receding, and the petulant boy is beginning to surface. "Mom, are you there? Did you hear me?" "I heard you, Leo," I say. My voice sounds thin. A stranger's voice in my own living room. "And what do you think?" I think of his daughter, Maya. She is 8 years old. I have a picture of her on the mantelpiece, a school photo. She has her mother's wide, serious eyes and a gap between her two front teeth that she is fiercely proud of. I think of her mother, Clara, Leah's ex-wife. A good woman. A tired woman. A woman who finally realized that you cannot build a life on a foundation of shifting sand. Leo is supposed to be paying child support. I know, from a pained and reluctant phone call with Clara last month, that the payments are sporadic at best. She told me she had to take on a second job, cleaning offices at night, just to make the rent. She didn't call to complain. She called to apologize that she and Maya might miss my birthday because she couldn't get the time off. I think, I start slowly, choosing my words like stepping stones across a treacherous river. I think you have other responsibilities, Leo. The silence on his end is different now. It is not expectant. It is cold. Hard. What does that mean? He clips out. It means Maya, I say, my voice finding a little more strength. It means your daughter. A short, sharp, bitter laugh comes through the phone. Oh, I see. Clara's been talking to you. Of course. Running to my mother to cry poor. That's just like her. She didn't cry poor, Leo. She never does. I'm just saying that perhaps your focus should be on your existing commitments before you take on new ventures. This viz for Maya, he explodes, and the salesman is gone completely now, replaced by the full force of his righteous indignation. Don't you get it? This is for all of us. If this hits, I can give Maya everything she could ever want. A trust fund, college, anything. You think I want her living like that? You think I want to be behind on my payments? This is how I fix it. This is how I become the father she deserves. No. He believes it. That is the most tragic part. He truly believes that the next big score will solve everything. He doesn't understand that what his daughter needs is not a trust fund in 10 years. She needs a father today. She needs him to show up for her parent-teacher conference. She needs him to remember what size shoes she wears. She needs the $50 for her soccer league registration, not $50,000 for his fantasy. It's too much of a risk, I say quietly. A risk? Life is a risk. The biggest risk is doing nothing. Sitting in that shrine of a house, just letting the world pass you by. Is that what you want for me? Is that what Dad would have wanted for me? I'm there. And in sharing us, he has brought out the heavy artillery. His father, Robert, who adored his son, but was never blind to his faults. Robert, who once told me in the quiet of our bedroom, "The boy has a good heart, Helen, but his pockets have holes in them." Robert, who would have valued his granddaughter's security over his son's speculative dreams in a heartbeat. But Robert is not here to defend himself, so Leo can make him into whatever he needs him to be. An angel investor. A patron saint of reckless ambition. Don't bring your father into this, I say, and my voice is sharp now. I will bring him into this, he retorts, his voice rising. Because he believed in me. He always did. Unlike you, apparently, all you see is the past. All you see are mistakes. You don't see the man I am now. I close my eyes. I see the man he is now. He's a 40-year-old boy who has mistaken charm for character. He is a man who uses his own child as a justification for his selfishness. He is my son, and I love him. But the love feels different today. It feels heavy. It feels like a burden I am no longer strong enough to carry. I can't do it, Leo, I say. The words are small, but they feel immense. A 2-word revolution. The line goes utterly silent for a long moment. The ticking of the clock in the hall seems to get louder and louder. Tick, tock, a countdown. And then he says it. The words he has been saving. The final, terrible weapon in his arsenal. Then you don't love me. It's not a question. It's a statement. A verdict. He says it with a strange, cold calm. The calm of a judge passing sentence. If you don't support me, he continues, his voice flat and empty. If you can't stand behind me now, at the most important moment of my life, then all that stuff you've been saying for 40 years, all that unconditional love, it's all just words. It means nothing. It was a lie. It was a lie. He is trying to break my heart. He has taken the most sacred thing I have, my love for him, and twisted it into a transaction. A test of loyalty that has only one right answer. Give me the money, or you are a liar. Give me the money, or you have never loved me. I say nothing. There is nothing to say. Arguing would be pointless. It would be like trying to reason with a storm. To protest my love would be to accept his terms, to agree that it is something that can be proven with a bank transfer. My entire life has been an answer to his question. Every meal I ever cooked, every sleepless night I spent worrying, every dollar I scraped together for him. It was all my answer. If he cannot see that, then no words I speak now will make him understand. So, I stay silent. The silence is my real answer. It is a wall. It is a border. It is the end of a long, long road. Mom, he says, his voice a little uncertain now. He expected tears. He expected pleading. He did not expect this quiet, immovable wall. Mom, are you listening to me? I look at my hand on the chair. The skin is thin, like old paper. But it is steady. It is not trembling. I love you, Leo, I say, and my voice is a whisper. But my answer is no. And then, before he can speak again, before he can deliver another blow, I reach out my steady hand and I press the button on the phone, ending the call. The silence that follows is absolute. The ticking of the clock sounds like a drum beat in a vast, empty hall. His final words hang in the air, glittering and toxic. If you don't support me, you don't love me. Ooh. I just sit there, in the quiet house, with the ghost of my husband and the echo of my son's ultimatum. I look at the picture of my granddaughter on the mantelpiece. Her smile is wide and innocent. She knows nothing of this. She's in a world of scraped knees and spelling tests, and the simple, unquestioned belief that she is loved. And in that moment, I know what I have to do. It's not about punishing Leo. It's not about proving a point. It's about love. Real love. The kind that builds and protects and endures. The kind that doesn't demand proof. The kind that simply is. The phone sat dark and silent on the arm of the chair. The connection was severed, but the wire of his words was still plugged directly into my heart, feeding it a slow, cold poison. If you don't support me, you don't love me. Unconditionally. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat, a statue in a floral chair, and watched the afternoon die. The sun, which had been slanting warmly through the bay window, began its slow descent, dragging the light with it. The shadows of the old maple tree in the front yard crept across the living room carpet, long, skeletal fingers stretching towards me. The house grew cooler. The ticking of the clock in the hall seemed to grow louder in the deepening quiet, each tick a syllable of his accusation, each talk a beat of my own faltering heart. Don't love Edurain. I had been a mother for 40 years. My love for Leo had been the central organizing principle of my life, the sun around which my world revolved. When he was born, I held him to my chest and felt a love so fierce, so absolute, it was terrifying. I promised him then, in the silent language of a mother to her newborn, that I would always be there, always protect him, always love him unconditionally. And I had. I had loved him through tantrums and broken windows. I had loved him through sullen teenage years and the terrible poetry he wrote. I had loved him through failed exams and broken hearts. I had loved him through 3 failed businesses, each one taking a little piece of my savings and a larger piece of my hope. Every time he fell, I was there to help him up. Every time he failed, I was there to tell him he could try again. Every time he broke a promise, I was there to grant him a forgiveness he hadn't earned. I had believed this was the sacred duty of a mother, to provide a love that was a soft place to land, an endless, renewable resource, a love that never asked for anything in return. Now, sitting in the twilight of my silent house, I saw the flaw in my design. My unconditional love had become his ultimate safety net. It had never taught him to fly. It had only taught him that it didn't matter if he fell. He never had to truly face the consequences of his choices, because my love was always there to absorb the impact. And in his mind, that love had become an entitlement, an account from which he could endlessly withdraw. My love wasn't a gift I gave him. It was a service he expected. And now, for the first time, service had been refused. The room was dark now. I hadn't turned on a light. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside, casting a pale, sterile glow on the furniture. The floral pattern on my chair had disappeared into the gloom. I looked at the mantelpiece, at the row of photographs that were now just silver-etched silhouettes. Leo as a boy on his first bicycle, grinning a toothless grin. Leo at his high school graduation, his arm around me, his face full of unearned confidence. The picture of Maya, his daughter. Her small, hopeful face was a beacon in the darkness. His words had been meant to break me. You don't love me. He knew, with the unerring instinct of a spoiled child, exactly where to strike. He had aimed for the very foundation of my identity. But something unexpected was happening in the ruins. As I sat there, stripped of the title of good mother, I felt not a collapse, but a strange, quiet clarification. He had defined my love as my compliance, my agreement, my willingness to finance his life. But that wasn't love. Love wasn't a blank check. Love wasn't endless enabling. Real love, the kind Robert and I had shared, was about wanting the other person to be their best self. It was about mutual respect. It was about responsibility. Real love had substance. It had boundaries. My love for Leo had become a shadow love, a hollowed-out version of the real thing. And it wasn't just hurting me. It was hurting him. It was preventing him from ever growing up. And most unforgivably, it was hurting Clara and Maya. My quiet complicity, my endless financial first aid, had allowed him to neglect his most important duty. My support for him had come at a direct cost to them. The realization settled not with a crash, but with a deep, quiet certainty. I had been loving my son all wrong. The night passed. I don't know if I slept. I might have dozed in the chair, because I remember waking with a crick in my neck, the first gray light of dawn seeping through the window like dirty water. The house was cold. I felt a chill that went deep into my bones. I stood up, my joints stiff, and walked into the kitchen. I didn't make coffee. My mind was already wide awake. I walked to the small desk in the corner of the dining room. It had been Robert's desk. It was made of solid oak, and I had never moved it from this spot. It was where he paid the bills, wrote letters, and managed our modest life with a quiet, steady competence. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool wood. I hadn't sat here in years. I opened the top drawer. It smelled of old paper, cedar, and the faint lingering scent of my husband's pipe tobacco. Inside, beneath a stack of old warranties and bank statements, was his checkbook. Not my checkbook, with its pattern of cheerful bluebirds, but his. The business-like, no-nonsense kind, with a leather cover, now cracked at the seams. It was from a joint account I had never closed, the one that held the insurance money. It felt like a sacred object. I took out the checkbook and a pen, Robert's old fountain pen, which he'd only used for important occasions. I sat down in his chair. It didn't fit me quite right. It was molded to the shape of his body, not mine. I opened the checkbook. The last entry in the register was in his handwriting, a payment to the plumber dated 2 weeks before he died. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote the current date. I made the check out to Clara Bellwether. I paused for a moment, the nib of the pen hovering over the line. Then I wrote the amount. $10,000. It was a fifth of what I had. It was a significant, terrifying amount. It was an amount that would make a real difference. In the memo line, I wrote 3 words. A for the girls. Ede. Mesh. Then I tore the check from the book, the perforated edge making a soft ripping sound in the silent room. I found a piece of plain stationery in the drawer and wrote a short note. My handwriting was clear and steady. Clara, you know you would never ask. Please accept this. For you and Maya. For spring dresses and soccer shoes. For a month or 2 where you don't have to worry. For a little peace of mind. With love. Eden. I didn't mention Leo. I didn't mention the phone call. This was not about him. This was a transaction between 2 women, a grandmother and a mother, united in their love for a little girl. I folded the note around the check and slid them into a clean, white envelope. I sealed it. I addressed it to Clara's apartment, the address I knew by heart. I placed a stamp squarely in the top corner. I put on my coat and my boots. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the eastern sky in pale shades of rose and gray. The air outside was cold and sharp, and it felt good to breathe it in. It felt clean. I walked down the driveway, my footsteps the only sound on the quiet street. I opened the cold metal door of my mailbox and raised the little red flag. I slid the envelope inside. It landed with a soft, final thud. I closed the mailbox door. The click echoed in the morning air. As I walked back to the house, I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a quiet sense of rightness, of order restored. I had not abandoned my son. I had simply redirected my love. I had sent it where it was needed most. I had sent it to his child. The money was gone, a piece of my safety net cast to the wind. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt secure. I had finally done the right thing. I had finally learned to love properly. The sound of the mailbox closing was a period at the end of a long, painful chapter. As I walked back to my silent house, the rising sun casting my long shadow before me, I felt a strange and profound emptiness. It wasn't the ache of loss, but the clean, hollow feeling of a space that has been cleared of clutter. For years, my emotional landscape had been dominated by Leo, by his needs, his dramas, his endless potential, and his constant failures. My love and my worry for him had been the overgrown, thorny vines that had choked out everything else. Now, I had taken a pair of shears to them. The space that remained was vast, silent, and entirely my own. I wasn't sure what to do with it. That first day, the house felt too big. The silence was a presence, and it hummed with the words I hadn't said to Leo, and the words I now had no one to say them to. I moved from room to room, my hand trailing along the walls, the cool plaster a familiar comfort. This house, which had been my home for more than 4 decades, suddenly felt like a stranger's. It was a museum of a life that was over. Robert was gone. The children were grown. The woman who had presided over this home, the matriarch, the keeper of the flame, had been made redundant. I started in the kitchen. I made coffee, but the ritual felt hollow. I was simply a woman, alone, making a beverage. There was no one to pour a second cup for, no one to comment on the aroma. The quiet pressed in. I found myself listening for the phone to ring, my body tensed for another assault. But there was only silence. A thick, unyielding blanket of it. He was punishing me with his absence, not realizing it was the very thing I needed most. The first victory was small, almost laughably so. Around noon, I realized I was hungry. I opened the refrigerator. It was full of the things a mother keeps on hand. Milk, eggs, a block of cheddar cheese, the leftover pot roast from Sunday. My first instinct was to make a sandwich from the roast, the kind Leo loved, with extra mayonnaise. Then I stopped. My hand hovered over the foil-wrapped meat. I didn't actually want a pot roast sandwich. I rarely did. I made it because it was his favorite. I closed the refrigerator door. I looked around my own kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. On a high shelf, there was a can of smoked oysters. A silly, extravagant little purchase I'd made months ago, remembering how much Robert and I used to enjoy them on crackers on a summer evening. We hadn't bought them in years. Too frivolous. An indulgence. I got the step stool. My knees complained as I climbed it, but I reached the can. I blew a fine layer of dust off the top. I found the box of crackers in the pantry, the fancy kind with rosemary and sea salt that Sarah had once scoffed at as being pretentious. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened the can of oysters. I arranged the crackers on a plate, one of my wedding china plates that I never used. I ate my lunch. The smoky, salty taste was a shock to my palate, so different from the bland, comforting foods I usually ate. It tasted of sea and salt, and a life I had forgotten I was allowed to live. I ate every single one. It was a ridiculous lunch. It was a feast. The next day, I woke with a purpose. The silence was still there, but it felt less like a presence and more like a possibility. An empty canvas. If my old life was over, then a new one had to be built. And a life, like a house, has to be built from the ground up. I went to the bank. It was the same bank where Robert and I had opened our first account, a small local branch where the tellers still knew your name. The teller who helped me was a young woman with bright pink hair and a kind smile. Her name tag said, Kylie. I'd like to open a new account, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Just for me. Kylie didn't blink. She just nodded and started typing. Checking, or savings, or both. Both, I said. I was going to move the remainder of Robert's insurance, money, my money, into an account that had only one name on it, Helen Vance. It felt like a betrayal, for a moment. Disloyal to his memory. But then I looked at the checkbook in my purse, the one with his name on it, the one I had used to rescue his granddaughter. No, this wasn't a betrayal of Robert. It was an honoring of him. He had left me that money so that I would be safe. For the first time, I was truly taking responsibility for that safety myself. I walked out of the bank an hour later with a new debit card in my wallet and a book of temporary checks. The checks were plain, anonymous. They had no bluebirds on them. They were just mine. After a week, the silence from Leo continued. It was a living thing, a testament to his anger. A week ago, it would have broken my heart. Now, it was simply a fact. The sun rises in the east, the sky is blue, and my son is not speaking to me. I found I could live with it. I turned my attention to the house. It was full of ghosts. Not just Robert's, but the ghosts of the family we had been. The living room was arranged for conversation, for gatherings. The dining room table was set for 6, as it always was, in hopeful expectation of a family dinner that rarely materialized. I started in the living room. I pushed the heavy floral armchair, my chair, into the bay window, where the light was best for reading. I angled the sofa to face the fireplace, not the center of the room. I was no longer a hostess waiting for guests. I was a woman who wanted to sit by the fire. I went through the bookcases. They were filled with Leo's old college textbooks, Sarah's discarded self-help books, Chloe's collection of dog-eared fantasy novels. I bought boxes. I packed them all away. I was gentle. I was respectful. But I was firm. Their stories had taken up enough space on my shelves. It was time to make room for my own. I went to the local used bookstore, and I bought books I wanted to read. A biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. A collection of Mary Oliver's poetry. A thick, intimidating history of the Byzantine Empire. My shelves began to look like me. At the end of the week, I received a letter. It was a simple card, a thank you note. The handwriting was Clara's. Aylin, it said. I have no words. Thank you is not enough. You have given us breathing room. You have given us peace. Maya bought a new dress for the school dance. It's yellow. She looks like a little ray of sunshine. And I paid the rent for the next 3 months. I slept through the night for the first time in a year. Edgy. Thank you. Just, thank you. Iyun. I held the card in my hand for a long time. There was a small, greasy fingerprint on the corner, and I knew it was Maya's. This was real. This was where my love had landed. Not in some speculative high-risk venture, but here, in a yellow dress, in a good night's sleep for a tired mother. I folded the card and put it in the drawer of my bedside table. It was the first deposit in my new account, the one that measured wealth in peace of mind. After a month, I started a new project. I had always wanted to paint. Robert had always encouraged me, had even bought me a set of watercolors one Christmas. They had sat in a closet, untouched, for 15 years. There was never time. There was always something more important to do. A meal to cook, a shirt to iron, a grandchild to watch. I signed up for a beginner's class at the local community center. The first day, I was terrified. I was the oldest person in the room by 30 years. The other students were young, confident, their hands steady. My hands trembled as I squeezed the thick, vibrant paint onto the palette. The teacher, a woman with paint-splattered glasses, came and stood behind me. "Don't be afraid of it," she said gently. "It's only paper. You can always start over. It's only paper. You can always start over." The words were a revelation. I had lived my life as if it were a final masterpiece, terrified of making a single mistake. I had forgotten that life is just a series of sketches. You can always turn the page. You can always start again. I painted a bowl of fruit. It was terrible. The apple looked like a lumpy tomato. The banana was a strange, sickly yellow. But it was mine. I had made it. I had taken a blank white space and filled it with color. The next week, I painted another. It was slightly less terrible. This was my new life. It was quiet. It was small. It was measured in things like the taste of smoked oysters, the feel of a new checkbook, the sight of a terribly painted apple. It was a life built of small, deliberate victories. And it was the first life that had ever felt entirely my own. The seasons turned. Summer bled into a crisp, golden autumn. The giant maple tree in my front yard shed its fiery leaves, blanketing the lawn in a carpet of rust and gold. My life had found a new rhythm, one dictated by the rising of the sun and the schedule of my painting class, not by the ringing of a telephone or the urgent needs of my son. The silence from Leo had stretched from weeks into months. It had ceased to be an active, angry thing. It had become the new landscape, the quiet, unchanging background of my days. I no longer woke with a jolt of anxiety, expecting his call. I had accepted it. He was gone, a ship that had sailed over the horizon. I had begun to believe I was finally free of his tide. It was on a Tuesday afternoon in late October that the past came knocking. Not literally. It arrived in the sleek, silent form of a luxury sedan, a deep, glossy black that seemed to absorb the gentle autumn light. I was in the living room, sketching the way the light fell on a bowl of late-season apples, when the car pulled into my driveway. It moved with a quiet, arrogant confidence that was instantly familiar. I knew the car. It belonged to Sarah, Leo's second wife, the one he'd married after the divorce from Clara. Sarah was a woman who measured the world in brand names and square footage. She had never approved of this small house, had always viewed it with a kind of polite disdain, as if it were a shabby, embarrassing relative. My heart, which had been beating at a slow, contented rhythm, gave a sudden hard thud against my ribs. I put my sketchbook down. My hand was steady, but a cold knot was tightening in the pit of my stomach. I had built my new life in the quiet space Leo's anger had created, but I had never considered an emissary. She didn't come to the front door. After a moment, the passenger door opened and Leo got out. He looked thinner. There were new lines of strain around his mouth, and his usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a slump in his shoulders that looked like defeat. He hesitated for a moment on the driveway, looking at the front of the house as if he wasn't sure he had the right address. Then, he started up the walk. I did not rush to the door. I waited. I listened to his footsteps on the concrete path. Then, the two heavy thuds as he came up the porch steps. I heard him take a breath. Then, the sound of the doorbell, a cheerful two-note chime that sounded obscene in the tense silence. I walked to the door and opened it. He stood there, blinking in the sudden light of the hallway. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit I'd never seen before, but it was rumpled, as if he'd been sleeping in it. His eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a desperate, hunted look. The anger was gone. In its place was a raw, undisguised panic. "Mom," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Hello, Leo," I said. My voice was calm, neutral. I did not smile. I did not open the door wider. I simply stood there, a quiet, unmovable object in his path. Can I come in?" he asked, his gaze flickering past me into the house, as if searching for the familiar landscape of his childhood. "Why are you here, Leo?" I asked. It wasn't an unkind question. It was a necessary one. He flinched, as if the question itself were a physical blow. He glanced back at the black car, where I could see Sarah's silhouette in the driver's seat, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. "I'm in trouble, Mom," he whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Real trouble. The deal. The big one. It went bad. It wasn't what they said it was. It was a scam. A big one. And I'm holding the bag. They're coming after me. Mom, the investors. They're saying it was fraud. They're talking about lawyers, about pressing charges." I see. The rocket ship had not just exploded on the launch pad this time. It had blown up the entire space center. I looked at my son, at the panic in his eyes, at the fine sheen of sweat on his upper lip, and I felt nothing. A decade ago, 5 years ago, even 6 months ago, these words would have sent me into a flurry of frantic activity. I would have pulled him inside, made him tea, and asked the fatal question, "How much do you need?" My own fear would have mirrored his. His problem would have instantly become my problem. But I was no longer that woman. I had spent months learning the quiet, difficult art of detachment. I had learned to separate his emergencies from my own life. "Where is the money, Leo?" I asked, my voice still quiet. The 50,000 you already invested before you called me? He had the grace to look away, his eyes fixed on a crack in the porch floor. It's gone, he mumbled. All of it. It's all gone. Of course it was. I see, I said. He looked up at me again, his eyes pleading. This was the moment. He had laid his disaster at my feet. Now he was waiting for me to do what I had always done. He was waiting for me to fix it. I need help, he said, his voice cracking. I don't know where else to go. Sarah, she doesn't understand this kind of thing. Her family, they'll cut me off. You're the only one I have. You're the only one I have. The words were meant to be a plea, but they sounded like a curse. I was his last resort. The lender of last resort. The final, unconditional safety net. I thought of the $10,000 I had sent to Clara. I thought of her thank you note, of Maya's yellow dress, of a mother's peaceful sleep. That was real. That had meaning. This chaos, this self-inflicted disaster born of greed and foolishness. This was just noise. I looked from his desperate face to the sleek black car waiting in my driveway. Sarah hadn't even bothered to get out. She had sent him to the door like a child being sent to ask a neighbor for a cup of sugar. They were a team only when it was convenient. In a crisis, he was on his own. And in that moment, I knew my answer. It wasn't born of anger or a desire for revenge. It was born of a deep, weary clarity. My help would not save him. It would only postpone this day. It would teach him nothing. Another bailout would only ensure another, bigger disaster down the road. Sometimes, the most loving thing a mother can do for her child is to let him fall, and to trust that he is strong enough to get back up on his own. I'm sorry to hear that you're in Leo, I said. And I was. I was sorry for the foolish, frightened man standing on my porch. But his trouble was not my trouble. I hope you find a way to resolve it. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing slightly, like a fish pulled from the water. He could not comprehend what he was hearing. He was waiting for the next sentence, the one that began with, "Let me see what I can do." But it never came. That's it, he said, his voice incredulous. I hope you resolve it? That's all you have to say to me? Yes, I said. That's all. The disbelief in his eyes slowly hardened into a cold, bitter fury. It was the anger of a man who has had his ultimate entitlement denied. I knew it, he hissed, taking a step back. I knew you didn't love me. When it really matters, when my life is on the line, you're not there. You'd rather sit here and paint your stupid little pictures than help your own son. He gestured wildly with his hand, as if to dismiss my entire new existence. My love for you and my money are two separate things, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I finally learned the difference. He just stared at me for another long moment, his face a mask of contempt. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked back down the path, his expensive suit looking cheap in its defeat. He got into the passenger seat of the black car. He did not look back. The car backed smoothly out of my driveway and disappeared down the street. I stood in the open doorway for a long time, the cool autumn air washing over me. The past had come and gone. It had tested the walls of my new life, and they had held. I closed the door. The click of the latch was a sound of finality, a final severance. I went back to my chair in the living room and picked up my sketchbook. I looked down at the half-finished drawing of the apples. The light had changed. The shadows were different now. I picked up my pencil, and I began to draw again. The first snow of the season came a week before Christmas. It started in the afternoon, small, hesitant flakes drifting down from a sky the color of pearl. I stood at my bay window, a mug of hot tea warming my hands, and watched as the world outside was slowly simplified. The sharp edges of the houses and the bare branches of the trees softening under a gentle blanket of white. The silence of the snow was a peaceful thing. It muffled the sound of the passing cars, and it seemed to absorb the lingering echoes of the past. My days had found their own quiet, unhurried rhythm. Mornings were for me, for reading, for sitting with my tea and watching the birds at the feeder. Afternoons were for my art. My little studio, which had once been a spare bedroom full of dusty boxes, was now my favorite place in the house. It smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. Canvases were stacked against the walls, most of them failures, some of them showing a glimmer of promise. The results didn't matter as much as the process, the quiet, focused concentration of trying to capture the color of a winter sky, or the delicate, wrinkled skin of a clementine. It was work that was honest, and it was all my own. The house was ready for the holidays, but in a new way. There was no giant tree in the living room, no boxes of tangled lights dragged down from the attic. Instead, a simple, elegant wreath of pine and eucalyptus hung on the front door, its clean, sharp scent greeting me whenever I came home. On the mantelpiece, amongst the small, smooth stones I'd collected, and the framed photo of Robert, there was a new addition, a small, brightly colored painting of a yellow bird done by Maya. Clara had sent it to me. It was clumsy and vibrant and full of a child's uninhibited joy. It was the only Christmas decoration I needed. My life was not grand. It was not filled with the noise and drama that I had once mistaken for importance. But it was real. It was a life built on a foundation of my own choosing. In the quiet, I had discovered a contentment that was deeper and more abiding than any happiness I had known before. It was the contentment of self-possession, the quiet joy of a life lived on one's own terms, answerable only to oneself. This morning, I am sitting in my floral armchair by the window. The snow has stopped, and a brilliant, low sun is making the fresh snow glitter as if it were scattered with diamonds. A car pulls up across the street, and a young woman helps her elderly mother out of the passenger seat, carefully guiding her up the shoveled walkway. It's a small, ordinary act of love. A quiet act of showing up. I take a sip of my tea. The house is warm around me, a safe, quiet shell. It is no longer a museum of the past or a stage for someone else's drama. It is my sanctuary, my partner, my home, and it is enough. So, that's my story, or the part of it that matters. It's not really a story about money or a bad investment. It's not even a story about a mother and a son. It's a story about the quiet, difficult, and ultimately liberating act of redefining love. Maybe you know the feeling. Maybe you've loved someone so much that you've forgotten where they end and you begin. Maybe you've been the fixer, the rescuer, the endless safety net, the one who always says yes, because you believe that's what love does. We are taught that a parent's love, a partner's love, should be unconditional. And it should be. But unconditional does not mean without boundaries. It does not mean your own well-being is the price of admission. It does not mean you have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The most important investment you will ever make is in your own peace of mind. It's the only asset that truly appreciates over time. And sometimes, protecting that investment means having the courage to say no to. It means having the courage to let someone you love face their own consequences, not because you love them less, but because you love them enough to want them to be whole. My journey back to myself didn't start with a dramatic confrontation. It started with a quiet click of a button on a telephone. It started with the simple, powerful realization that my love had been misplaced. Love isn't a blank check for bad behavior. It's not a permission slip for selfishness. Real love is wanting the best for someone, and sometimes the best is a hard lesson they have to learn for themselves. Real love is sending a warm coat out into the storm, not inviting the storm into your own home. So, I'll leave you with this thought. Where is your love going? Is it being invested wisely? Is it building something strong and true? Or is it just being used to patch the endless holes in a sinking ship? It's a hard question, I know. But it's the most important one you'll ever ask. If you feel like sharing, I would be honored to read about your own stories in the comments. I'll be here. And I'll be wishing you strength.